the Australian Hunting and Beyond podcast with Matt. The hunting journey continues. Let's get into it. Okay, welcome back tonight or today, depending when you want to listen to the podcast. I've got a really good one because it's something that has always fascinated me and I probably don't do anywhere near enough of it. It is hunting using calls. So I'm joined by Paul from H2K Hunting Calls. Mate, how's things?
Good, thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me. It's nice to meet you finally.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Has been.
Mate, look, there's so many things here. What makes one go, hey, I'm going to start playing around and designing hunting calls?
Mainly losing a lot of chickens.
Okay. Do you want to elaborate on that? I'm guessing foxes.
So, yeah, I was living out of town, just had started a new family, breeding turkeys and had heaps of chickens. I'd lost a few turkeys, baby turkeys and lots of chickens to the foxes, and I was just struggling. I didn't know how to stop them from getting into the pens and stuff. So I ordered some traps from the local council. I tried them and nothing worked. I trapped my cat and my dog more than anything. And then I decided to look online because I had guns. I like to shoot, target shooting a lot and stuff like that. And I had bows and arrows. I just like to target shoot a lot ever since I was a kid. And yeah, so I started looking online at different fox calls and stuff like that, and I come across, I think, what most people do on their first fox call is you tenterfield, just your folded piece of steel with the hole in it.
Yep.
And I started with that and called in my first fox, and it started from there really. And then I was like, wow, I was more intrigued at the fact that you can talk to another animal. The fact that the rabbit is more of it's speaking to the animal, saying that he's going to get a free feed, but then I got more into it that like deer and dogs and stuff, you can actually communicate with an animal and they'll talk back to you. I found that really, really intriguing.
I've been obviously following you and your journey on Instagram, and I saw the video of you making the diaphragm callers.
Yeah.
And I'm so curious about them, and we'll get into the deer calling in that later, but
yeah.
How is it? Because they're just pieces of paper that are sort of overlapped in certain positions, I'm guessing, from watching what happens. Do you want to give us a sort of breakdown of how the diaphragms are made and what they do?
Yeah, no worries. So what they are is they're basically a reeded musical instrument. When they're broken down, you get a little piece of paper like this, and it's like a waterproof mouth tape, similar to what you get in like your medical stores and stuff like that. Super sticky, and it comes with a little, it's like a clamp. So that folds in half, and that's what holds your latex in there. And when you layer your reeds, you'll stack your reeds depending on how thick, deep in pitch you want the reeds to be. So the more layers of reeds you have, the deeper in tone and pitch it's going to be. And when the reeds get stretched at a certain stretch rate, so I have a little machine here that I stretch the latex with. I put the latex in here and it stretches it to say within 500 mils of an inch. And once I've played with that and I've found what call I want to make, I can distribute them so that every call is exactly the same. And the way that it works is once it's put together and you end up with your little mouth call, so you've got your stretched reeds and it's all put together, that's your finished product there. So the reeds are going to be always facing to your roof of your mouth, and it's also called a palate call. It'll sit right up in the roof and the palate of the mouth here. And when you breathe across the reeds will vibrate on your tongue, similar to what like a flute would do inside a reed inside a flute or a saxophone or something like that. So essentially, yeah, it's an instrument that you have to teach yourself how to use. The more pressure you put on it with your tongue, you're going to get high pitch. You let your tongue pressure off, you're going to get low pitch. So, for instance, also if you're howling, ooh, and you drop your jaw, it's going to go, ooh. So moving your lips and different jaw drops is going to give you different tones and pitches as well.
It sounds like such an art form.
It is. It's a very intriguing art form.
How did you work out how many reeds to layer to target a specific animal call? Like if you're trying to mimic a rabbit, for example, to call in foxes. How did you know?
Oh, I found it that after I'd done a lot of research on them, and they started off as a turkey call. They use them in the States for hunting turkeys. And when they do that, they put a cut in the call, and it has a little cut in the call where a howler will be straight reeds. So the cut in the top reed on the call will allow that top reed to move and manipulate on your tongue to give you your different like oohs and ahs and ees. So if you want to do a rabbit, when you're breathing across the reed, you're trying to say ree, rah, ree, and that comes out like an injured rabbit through the sound on the tone board. So essentially the bottom reed of the call is your tone board, which is just there for tone and pitch, and then your next reeds are going to be there for thicker layering, or if you want more tone, and then the cuts are going to be for raspiness to put that cut in it, it's more of a throaty call, so like a rabbit, fox, cat, things like that.
How did you teach yourself this stuff? Because there's so much to it. There's so many different elements, and for anyone that hasn't yet, jump over to Instagram and check out H2K Hunting Calls. And the video on there is super interesting. So I know Paul is describing it to us over the platform. However, he's also showing me as we go. But if you want to see that, jump onto his Instagram, and he's got some really good videos there of how it's made. When we're looking at these things, is there instructions on making them? Was there a course, or do you have a musical background?
No, not at all. I'd never hunted. I'm not really musical at all. I'd never hunted at all until I had this fox problem. And I just mainly looked online. And I was just looking on there one day because, like I said, I was intrigued at learning how animals speak to each other. And I wanted to find out more about howlers because I couldn't find howlers anywhere in Australia. All I could find was coyote calls. So you still get them a lot here in Australia. They're coyote calls, but they're sold as howlers because it's still eventually it might work because it's sort of like the same thing. But I found I had lots of trouble because the only howlers I could get were coyote calls. So I ordered a few of my own calls through the States. My first one was a Primo's Sonic Dome howler, and I taught myself how to howl like a coyote on that. And just from time and practice and learning how to howl, I don't know, just one day I decided to pull it apart. So I pulled it apart to see what it was made from, and I was like, I reckon I can make one of these. And I found out what it was, and it was actually latex. That's all the reeds are. They're a latex reed. So I went down to my local supermarket and brought some latex gloves. I went and bought some sheet metal, drew myself a little template, cut me reeds out and stretched them out and put it all together. And then I went and brought waterproof Lucacast, I think it's called. It's a medical tape that you get from the chemist, and it's fully waterproof. So it was able to be able to put in the mouth without anything happening. And that's what I'd use for the tape. It was very, very, very primitive when I first started out. But yeah, I tried it out for the first time and I was like, wow, I made one. And then it went from there.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool. I definitely put my hand up there, and I would have zero ability to do that. And it's one thing I've always struggled with, I guess, is even though it's funny that I'm producing a podcast, but actually hearing things. So I'm terrible with rhythm and beat and music. I can't dance for anything. But I sit there and go, okay, the slightest tweak in these things can give you a whole different sound.
Exactly, yeah. The slightest bit of tongue pressure up or down is going to give you a completely different noise. The slightest lip movement, the slightest jaw movement.
So how, when you sell the product, and, I understand that they can all come out the same because of your stretch box and you have your sort of presets and whatnot.
Yes.
How do you, I guess, teach someone, or how do someone master the sound that they're trying to achieve? Is that one of your biggest obstacles? Because the product in essence is going to be the exact same, but the ability of the person using it could be very different.
Yes and no. Some people have a very struggle with it. I don't know whether it's an overthinking problem or trying to think I have to blow, now I have to move my tongue, and now I have to move my jaw. And then other people just seem to be able to whack it straight in and off they go. Like for instance, I had a customer buy some off me a few weeks back, and he had a tingling sensation on his tongue from when he's using it. And it was because he had the call too far forward in his mouth when he was blowing it, and it was vibrating on the tip of his tongue. And he just said he struggled with it really hard, and he gave one to his cousin. His cousin popped one in, and he was able to pop out cat calls straight away. So it really does come down to the individual in the end, I think.
I think I've used them when I was super young, and I remember going to a fair.
Like a bird call, I remember.
Yes, that's it, the bird caller. And I probably sounded like a dodo, to be honest. I think that was the only bird I was mimicking with the calls. But I really struggled with that because I just couldn't get it. Same as what you're saying, maybe it was different in the mouth and I couldn't move my jaw or whatever it was, but it was amazing hearing and I was similar to you. I was sort of like, oh my God, he does sound like a bird, and all these different bird noises. And I'm listening to him doing it, and he was doing it with such ease. And I obviously bought one, or my parents bought me one, and I tried to use it, and yeah, it was terrible. But I can understand the value in it.
And the persistence paying off. It's almost like a musical instrument. You feel the gratitude at the end of it's like, yes, I've finally done it.
Well, and probably more so, because if you're doing that, not only have you achieved I guess you could almost call it a song, but you're getting the extrinsic sort of motivation coming in by the animal coming in to show you, hey, you've tricked me.
Yeah.
That's what they're designed for.
That's the most gratification I get. Like, I've called lots of animals in and not touched them, just looked at them just to test calls, see how they go.
So when you are developing a new call, what's the method to that? I don't want to give away your secrets, but is it something that you'll just go, I think I can move a reed here or add a reed here, and that will do it, and then you just take it out to the field?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So recently, this is actually one here. This is a 3. It's up for sale now, but I only not long designed this one. This is the 3-reed snaggletooth. So off the one call, you can do a rabbit call, a fox call, and a cat call, all on the one in the mouth at the same time.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And designing that, I was like, because I knew how to make the rabbit call. That was usually done with a 2-reed with a double cut either side. And I decided to add an extra reed on top, so it's a 3-reed, and then it's essentially 3 cuts. So one cut puts a nice deep V in it, and on the edge of the V you put another cut, which puts like another very close V, so it vibrates on the left side, and then also on the right side you have 2 little pieces, like 2 little tongues that vibrate at the same time. So that's essentially going to give you almost like a rollover effect, like you would like if you were rolling your tongue, like a it's going to give you that effect on the end of your tongue with the 2 little pieces. And I decided that if I can do that properly, I should be able to get different calls, because you can sit your tongue on one side and make it so only one side will flutter, or you can move it off a bit and you can have 3 sides of it fluttering. So you can have the left and the 2 little pieces fluttering, so that you can use the call and manipulate them in so many different ways.
Wow. Like, it's impressive that you can actually hear that and be able to do that, design it through and I mean, that's probably how you're doing it, I'm guessing, is just hearing it and what it comes out. And how much time does it take to play around with these?
Long time. I've been making calls now for 12 years. It's only recently, probably in the last maybe 5, that I've actually been making good quality professional or good quality gear, professionally made calls. And it's just something that I have a passion for. I think it'll always be there. I love whistles. I love anything that makes a noise. I think that's my problem.
So how much time does it take to make one? Like, I know you've got your clip there that it's a 20-second sped up one, and that's great because it's easy to watch. But how did that play out in real time? Like, what was the time that took? And that's not even the development stage. That's just, hey, I've got the development. Here, I just got to do this to create one.
Yeah,
what's that take?
I've got all my stretches and everything written down. So once I've got this one developed, I've got a specific stretch for this call. So I'll stretch my latex and stuff like that. So to make that single call, I would say it would take me anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes, depending on how well I can concentrate, because it's fiddly, nichey little work. You have to put little frames together on latex without crimping the latex, and yeah, it's fiddly little work. But yeah, I'd say anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes on one call. When I first started, it used to take me an hour on one call.
Just perfecting it as you go along. Like anything, practice makes perfect.
It does, yeah.
When you're saying latex, you mentioned, what's the degradation of it? Like, how long would a diaphragm call last?
Depending on how you look after it and where you keep it. So because it is latex, if you keep it in the sun or if you leave it in your car or something like that, the latex is going to deteriorate. When you're finished with the call, obviously because it's been in your mouth's yucky, you want to clean the call. You'll put it in a lot of water with a small part of mouthwash, give it a good clean it off with fresh water, and then you'll keep it in a container which can still breathe, and leave it in the fridge. And that will keep your reeds nice and fresh and crisp, and they'll last anywhere from 6 to 12 months depending on how you look after it.
Okay, so that's, if you're doing the right thing, that's a pretty decent amount of time.
Yeah, I've heard of people having these calls up to 2 years later and more, but I'm going to say that even though they've had it for that long and it's lasted that long, the tone in the latex is going to change after that time.
You mentioned waterproofing. Obviously, the whole thing's not waterproofed. I'm guessing that's at the start of where you're blowing through, because that's where moisture would be coming through. Is that sort of a good guess?
The whole tape is all waterproof. It's completely waterproof. And so when it sits in the roof of your mouth and it sits up in the actual roof of your mouth, the round part of the coil here is going to be sitting at the back of your mouth. So when you blow, it pushes up and cups the back of your mouth, and it comes over the reed, through the reed and the top of your mouth, like through between your tongue and the top of the mouth. So it's going to be going, and when you push pressure up with your tongue, you'll get high pressure. Off with the tongue, you'll get low pitch. High pitch, low pitch.
Okay, so a way to probably for listeners to, I guess, picture that is what...
I'm terrible at explaining things.
That's cool. Yeah, no, like it's a rudder on an aeroplane. So,
Exactly.
You put them up and down, and that changes the high and the low pressure to obviously have lift,
Yeah.
or to push down to land. So you're doing a similar thing, but instead of going up or down, your pitch is going up or down.
Yeah, and the way when you don't notice it, but if you think about it when you do it, when you go with your mouth, your tongue naturally pushes up towards the roof of your mouth. So every time you breathe out, your tongue will push up, and it'll make this little thing here push up to the back of your mouth and actually push this airtight. That's what starts to create the sound over the reeds.
Yeah, okay. What's one worth?
They are worth anywhere it depends. I just sell mine at a base rate of $25, I think it is. I can't even remember off the top of my head. But they're worth anywhere from that up to $60, depending on the brand name that you buy. And I reckon it would cost me probably $12 to $14 to make one in the end, maybe a bit less.
And then your time. So, like, you're not, obviously you don't do it for the money or...
No, it's purely a hobby. It's just something that I love.
Yeah, that's cool. I get it. That's where, the podcasting I really thoroughly enjoy that side of it. And like this, I'm so happy that I've got you on here, because hearing about this stuff. Great. Yeah, hearing his stuff is just so interesting to me that I don't know where it started. I don't know who was the first person that we can do this to create music to then, twist it and focus it to really attract animals for hunting purposes.
Yeah.
But it's like visionary stuff though. And that fascinates me. And that's what I love about hunting, the culture behind things. There's so much that even the majority of hunters probably don't actually think about.
Oh, exactly.
Like, how many hunters would actually sit there and think about the details and how there's so many elements that go into this call?
Like, yes.
They probably just throw it in their mouth and use it. I'll put my hand up and say I'm guilty of that.
How many duck hunters know what they're saying to their ducks?
Well, that's it. I use the T2 for foxes, and I'll just put it in and blow it. And I've never thought, well, how is that sound being produced?
That's what I would say the difference between a distress call, which is what you would use for foxes and things like that, and then an actual hunting call, which is what you would use I would say is an actual fox call. So you'd be producing fox sounds to talk to the fox, which is what you can do on the snaggletooth.
What do you find works better?
As in?
Attracting the fox towards you.
An injured rabbit.
Yeah, injured rabbit's the best.
Yeah, I just find an injured rabbit always works best, and fox calls do work depending on the time of the year. During winter time, it's always hard to get the foxes to come in because they're breeding. So I like to use vixen screams.
Yeah, okay.
And pretend that you're a female. So then you're gonna get other males come in, and every single fox has got a different call. So every fox will distinguish each fox from another one, because no fox has the same call, which is very unique in itself.
That is a really interesting one. And one of the reasons I wanted you on is I was reading a book the other week, and it was talking about calling deer in, and what you're saying, that language between you and the animal.
Yeah.
And what it was saying was that, I don't want to give too much away, that you've sort of got to match what the other animal is doing. So say a stag is roaring.
If he's roaring, yeah.
If you do too many for too long or too many breaks, it can say, hey, I'm a smaller male, don't worry about me, or it can be you can put it off. So it's such a art form and science.
It's a touch and go. Yeah, very much. Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
So it started with foxes to save the chickens and the turkeys, and it's progressed because you've got a heap of other stuff there.
Yeah, very much so.
You got a heap of other stuff there that you make, and I'm still chasing my first deer. So I want to try and practice for next year's rut because I went out in the rut this year and, man, I loved it. Heard croaking bucks for the first time.
Yeah.
It was absolutely sensational.
Awesome.
Having a fellow buck croaking run 7 meters away from me chasing does, man, like it was such a brilliant experience and one I'll probably won't ever forget.
Just sounds amazing just listening to it.
Oh, man, it was great. But I now want to learn how to croak really well because what I did do is probably cheating and you might think badly of me, but I had a caller. Yeah, I had my phone and I think it's the iHunt app and I had my croaks in there and I had a mate with us, shout out to Tristan, and he turned on the speaker and it just went there, and I just thought, oh, I don't think we fooled the deer on that, but hey, that's okay. But yeah, so I was thinking of trying to really practice the croaking. What's the call for that? How do you make them and how do they differ from the diaphragm calls?
So they're a tube call. Off the top of my head, I do think you can make a fallow diaphragm mouth call, but I haven't got around to that stage yet. You can make actual doe deer calls out of mouth calls, and I'm working on that at the moment. That's in the stages. But for the croakers, you use a tube call. And that's one of the other things that I moved on to. And they are a tunable call. So they are also a dual call. You use them for your red deer and your fallow deer.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can use it to roar, really good lowering roar for your reds, or you can croak with it. You can do some amazing croaks with these for the fallows. It sounds really cool. So what they are is they are a high impact acrylic polymer. That's what these are made from, which makes them pretty much indestructible. You can throw it around all day and you pretty much won't break it. But they all pull apart, so they're easy to clean, easy to pull apart and put back together because anything that you put and spit through is obviously going to be disgusting. And being tunable, so it has a tone board. This is your tone board here, which you can see. It's got different slots, so you're starting at a buck right up the top. When you're blowing through that, it's going to give you that real high, roary tone. As you move down, it's moving down, so you can do a younger buck down into a doe, or you can use it for a fawn. Right down the bottom, it's where the young fawn go, ma, ma. Really excellent call. I like this call.
So for our listeners, it basically looks like when you're talking about this board, it looks like 2 sort of plastic bits
so yeah,
together.
The first one is the tone board, which is your big white plastic piece, and the other one, that is a mylar reed. Your mylar reed is what gives you your roar.
That's what's moving, so it's similar to the diaphragm in the sense what's flapping.
Yeah, so when you're breathing through the tube, that's bouncing up and down. And your tone board there, you can hear that?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So amplify that by 1,000 and about another 1,000 times that in speed.
Yep. Because you're blowing. Yeah, okay.
But it's not as simple as just blowing through the call either. Some calls are, like your predator calls, like we were saying for foxes. When you're using them for croaking, you're actually going to have to add tone through your throat. You're going to have to be doing like ho, ho, ho. Much different to just using like a fox call.
Okay, so it's probably the most important question I'm going to give you tonight is how does the missus feel when you're making all this noise in the house?
Not only the missus, but the neighbours. I have had some strange questions over the years. People stop me outside and, what are those noises coming?
What's going on in your house, mate?
What are you killing next door? But it's taxing on her sometimes.
100%. And, the wives do put up with a lot.
Even my children tell me to shut up now.
I was going to say, you've got kids as well. Like, it's probably, I don't want to make too much noise because if I can get them to bed, I don't want them waking up. That's my time now. Yeah. How do you find that noise, I guess, the volume part? Because there's so many elements. We've talked about tone. We've talked about pitch, the volume. Because when we're trying to create a volume and mimic a red deer, for example, there's a big difference in size.
There is much difference.
So how do we get that same? How does the call help to get that same sort of depth to sort of say, hey, I'm another big stag?
That's a great question. This is one I've been trying to explain to people for a while. And it's when I explain to people of using their diaphragm, using their belly to use a call rather than using their lips and their cheeks. I see a lot of people grab a call and they'll use their mouth and their cheeks to blow through the call when they want to use their belly and actually use it. You force that air out, especially if you're going to use a buck. You think a buck, how much pressure and how much he's tensing up when he's putting out that roar and he's putting out, I'm saying how big and strong I am. So you're trying to mimic that. So when you're doing that, you're using your diaphragm to one big long breath. You're using your hands to cup the call to make the call deeper and louder. And as it gets out, you're letting your hands out so the call lets out louder and that roar just emanates through the hill. It's an amazing sound.
Okay, my next question, because I haven't heard a red deer roar in person. So with these calls, how would you go about practicing if you haven't actually physically been there? Because I know you can look on YouTube and I know you can hear sounds from a variety of places, but not actually physically being on the ground and hearing it close. That must give a different depth or different...
It does. You can almost feel it in your body when they do it.
Yeah, and I've heard that. A lot of people have talked about when Samba honk, that it's like a freight train hitting you,
it's like
coming through.
It's like something hitting you.
So how does someone that, like myself, I'll put my hand up and say, hey, haven't seen red deer in the field, haven't heard them. How would I go about trying to mimic? Because I don't know how loud I've got to be. I don't know that exact call. I'm only going to go off what I can sort of hear in YouTube, but there's got to be some audio, I guess, degradation that you're not going to hear it properly either.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a hard one to answer, actually. It's something that I probably struggled with as well. I thought a lot when I was younger, when I first started out calling, that I had to always be as loud as possible. And sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes just doing, like you said, pretending to be a smaller buck is actually going to bring in the big buck because he's not going to want you in the territory. But then other times you want to be loud. And like I said, I've always had that mindset of, I'm trying to produce that big, strong sound that he's doing, so I'm trying to put that effort into it. Where if I'm doing a doe or a younger call, I'm only lightly using my diaphragm. I'm not. I'm only light, slow breaths. They're not as heavy and as sharp because they're not as aggressive. If you can understand what I mean. Where a younger buck, he's not going to be as aggressive, so it's not going to be as sharp and as hard. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, no, that helps out a bit. So let's stick with fallow, because I'm actually the admin for the Australian Fallow Deer Hunters of Australia page. And I know there'll be so many people wanting to talk about this. There's always posts about, when should you make the noises and all that. If you're giving advice to the group, and there's 16,000 people at the moment, so, a lot of pressure on you. It's a pretty big stadium if you're a sports player. What are you saying to, I guess, have the best chance of that fallow deer thinking you're the same? And can we focus? Can we talk about can we talk about the bucks? Can we talk about the does? What are the different noises? How are you best successful? Is there one you think should be used more than others? And in different times of years? I know there's a lot to break down there, but we'll try and knock it out.
Fallow deer is a deer that I'm not as much more associated with, but I'll give it a shot. I think when you're using the call with the croakers, it's going to be about the how can I say? It's about not the cadence, your timing. They're a very timed animal, so you'll listen to their croaks and it'll be a wah 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 wah, and then you'll listen to another one and he'll be similar, but he's not quite the same. So you're going to be working on your own tone cadence and timing of getting that right, keeping your speed at the right speed and tone, keeping your call nice and clean, and listening, doing a lot of listening and a lot of watching. You want to do a lot of listening before you do any calling, especially when you're chasing bucks, to see what their mood is, what they're doing. which is obviously what you're going to be doing when you're chasing deer anyway. You're going to be doing a lot of watching to see where they're traveling, what they're doing, but you really want to see on their behaviors, whether they're acting aggressively, whether they're acting more towards the does, they're trying to get a bit more loving. You might want to use a doe call if they're on that side of the field. If they're being more aggressive and they're being heaps aggressive against other bucks, you want to try to do your buck calls and be more aggressive to get him in. And even whilst you're using your aggressive calls, have your rattles going at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense when you break it down, going, okay, you should be almost mimicking them, but obviously changing the tone, because you don't want to be identical to the buck, because then, that's not going to sound right as well to attract them.
I always think of it as they're going to be, like me and you, we have a different voice. They're going to sound the same to us, but to all of them, they're going to sound different. It's going to be like each person's got their own voice. Like I said before, a fox has got a different call. Every fox, even though it sounds the same, it's different. So each fox knows each individual fox from another one when they hear it.
So is there any tips and tricks you can give people for using the different calls? Like if you said, do you run courses on how to become a better caller, or do you?
No, I don't. Just always been a hobby of mine. That's calls. Like I said, it's more in the language of what I love animals. I've been interested in animals growing up my whole life, and just learning how they speak to each other is the main thing for me.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. So when we're talking that communication side, what is the hardest? What is the most challenging species for you in having that conversation with them to get them in?
Dogs are very hard. Dogs are extremely hard to call in. If you don't have that right call and you don't actually sound like a dog, they won't really come to you. I haven't had a lot of success with using other callers. You have to be very on point with your calling on dogs. Other than that, I'd say deer are probably the hardest. Even just getting close to a deer is one of the hardest things in the world. I could find you could go weeks upon weeks without even seeing a deer, let alone trying to call one.
Yeah, they're tricky buggers, and I wish they'd make it a bit easier for me, but that's...
But I will say, if I got the chance, and even try it, because I try to practice all different types of calls, even if the animal doesn't live here in Australia. One of my favourite calls to practice is the American turkey, and by far that is one of the hardest species I have ever tried to mimic. They have got so many different calls. They are amazing. I really love turkey, hence why I used to breed them. That was another thing too. I used to muck around with them, talking to the turkey and stir them up.
That's probably where it came from. Where it was like you sort of got that little bit of motivation, stirring them up while you were young, and that's where it's progressed to. So, mate, you said you hunt?
Yeah. I don't get to do a lot now because I'm a father, and I'm mainly now I work a lot. When I do get to hunt, it's just the odd occasional hunt for foxes, dogs, cats, bunny rabbits, things like that.
It's funny, and I always talk about this because I can tell you're passionate about animals.
Love animals.
And yeah, I can tell, but there's so many people just think, hunting, they must hate animals.
Yeah. Yes.
And just hearing about your passion and this whole journey that you've been on, and as you said, 12 years, long time to be creating these calls and doing these things. And you can see how much it means to you, which is fantastic. It's great that you've found something you're really passionate about. What makes you just go, I need to make that call better? Is there a point where you're happy with the call?
I think a lot of them can always be better, but especially the howlers, it took me a long time to get them on point because it was very hard to get them to work properly without cutting into that skippy tone like a coyote. They're very difficult to play with, where your cat calls and your fox calls and things like that, they're a bit more forgiving because you're able to cut the latex and stuff. They've got that, can I explain, a bit more of flexibility? Can I say, a bit more flexibility, so it gives you, but it's not going to be as forgiving. So a howl is not going to be as forgiving as a cat call or something like that because it has the cutting in it. It's going to be much more forgiving when you're playing with it in your mouth. So that's what gives you that ability to be able to play with it and make different calls, where a straight call, a howler, because it's so straight, you're only going to get those high pitches or low pitches depending on what you play with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. You talked, just to go back to the diaphragm calls, you talked previously about the cuts, does the depth of the cut, so if you go an extra 1 mil or 2 mil in that depth of cut, is that going to change the noise again?
Well, if the cut's too small, usually I find if you make a cut too small, it's going to make it not work properly. Going too deep, it's going to make your latex start to fold back on itself. So as you're using the core, the air flowing over the underneath of the core will blow the top reed and make it fold on itself, and then it won't work properly. So yeah, it is a bit of a touch and go process learning that as well.
There's just so much to it,
and with the stretches as well. If you when I first started as well, I found overstretching them and then cutting the latex, they would curl because they were stretched out too far. So once they're finding that happy medium with the stretches, so when you cut the latex reed, that they still sit nice and flush. Yeah.
Do they glue together when you are layering the latex? Is it they just sit together, and then how are they compressed to hold?
So yeah, they're just layered together, and as I lay them together, I have a specific little depth between each reed that I like to sit them at, and then you just use the tip of your scissors because they're actually they're a decent sized square piece or rectangle sized piece of latex, so they're almost the size of the big tape piece that I've got here, which is probably 3 inches. So when you lay them, you've got plenty of room. You just make sure you want your gaps at the top, and then you hit them with your scissors, keeps them nice and flush. And then when you actually put them in the little clamping device that stretches them, that's what keeps them nice and tight and flush and gives you that nice taut. It's what makes them look like they're compressed. But they are all separate. That's what makes them be able to vibrate separate. So on a 3 reed, you can, if you want to, you can use only 1 reed. So you can sit your tongue on it, so when you're breathing across it, you're only going to use the top reed. And then if you back your tongue off a bit more, you can use the 2 reeds. And if you back your tongue off a bit more, you can use 3 reeds. So then if you're using a cat call with 3 reeds and you don't want it to sound like a cat call, you can cut the front of it so that the cut reed doesn't work, and only the straight reeds will work, and you'll get more high pitch.
Okay, so yeah, there's so much.
There are so.
The more you keep talking, it's just so intrinsic. I'm sitting here and listening and absorbing it, and I'm just thinking about all the things that potentially can go wrong.
Definitely. And
it's so much harder to get it right, and then so many elements to change that noise. Mate, hats off to you how you do it, because it's definitely something that's not in my wheelhouse. I definitely couldn't do it.
They were the videos that are of me, they did not sound like that when I first started using them, and I can say I'm no professional still. I'm still learning. There is some really great callers out there that do some amazing stuff on them. They just sound like they're like a real animal.
I've seen on YouTube some of the competitions over in the States.
Yeah.
And man, they are very, very good. Is there anything like that here? So is there anything like that here in Australia?
No, I wish there was. I really wish there was. I'd enter in it straight away. I've even thought about something like that. I've done, how can I get something like that going?
It'd be good to have that at some sort of hunting expo or show or gathering, or that would be pretty cool.
Tamworth Expo, I think it is, that big massive one. Be perfect for it.
That could be a good one. I mean, Deer Expo, but then you're limited. It's probably only going to want to focus on deer calling, not sort of the range. But yeah, that's pretty cool.
Well, usually even over in the States when they're doing their calling, it's usually focus on a specific animal or a specific group of animals, like predator range, turkey, deer, things like that.
Do you have a favourite call to make?
My favourite call to make is a 3-reed howler, because they're my favourite call to use is a 3-reed, and probably the snaggletooth because it's my newest call, so I like making it. But I still enjoy making them all.
Do you find that sometimes you need that extra challenge?
I do. That's why I like trying to make new ones. So, I'm looking at different animals and looking at how they speak to each other, what the tone and the pitch sounds like. If I add another reed, like you said before, if I add a different cut. And that you even just play around with that. Sometimes you'll just sit there and you'll stack a couple of different reeds together and put a stretch into it and cut a few cuts into it and have a play and see what it sounds like.
So you said before the hardest was the dog. What's the easiest?
Easiest, I believe, is the rabbit.
To make the rabbit call?
Just the sound. Yeah, to make the rabbit call sound, okay. Yeah.
So then you're trying to get foxes probably out of
yeah, you're going to get dogs as well.
Yep. Yeah, okay. So
any predator, really. Foxes, dogs, cats.
Yeah, okay. I keep getting hung up on how much there is to learn about this. And how long it would take to master it. And, I appreciate you being honest and saying, hey, I'm 12 years in and I'm still learning and still need that practice and still
I'm still learning. Like this call that I have right here, I still struggle with this. I was mucking around earlier trying to play with it. And this is the original turkey call. So this is made out of the wing bone of an actual turkey. And it's just plugged together and then they would bind it up. It was made by native Indians, they believe, something like over 4,000 years ago. And there's nothing in it. It's just a completely hollow tube. And they would suck on it to imitate the putt and the clucks of wild turkeys. And to me, that is amazing. Who thought to put the bones together out of a wing bone and make turkey calls?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool. It looks pretty cool too. So like the two, you can obviously see.
Thank you. Yeah, I made that.
Yeah, that looks awesome. It's two, we'll get a picture put up as well, but it's basically this bone and then you've got feathers on it as well. That looks really cool.
That was just my take on a reproduction. But if you look them up, it's just amazing. How they thought to do that in my mind is just like, wow.
Yeah, 100%. Especially when you could almost say like it's a more primitive sort of society, not having what we would say modern civilized society with like bricks and mortar and things like that. So it is very impressive.
It is, yeah.
How many different calls do you make?
Off the top of my head, 20, maybe a couple more.
And how many species would that cover?
Few deer, pretty much all the species of deer around here that everybody hunts. So your red deer, fallow deer, sambar deer, dogs, fox, cat, rabbit, a lot of species.
Yeah, it's quite an array, and especially then each one has to be very, very specific for the animal that you're chasing.
And then you've got them for the actual animal. So you've got your predator calls for your foxes and that, and then you've got your actual fox calls for creating fox sounds and so on.
Yeah, that's a lot. When do you think you'll be satisfied?
Oh, never. Like I said, I'm always learning. So
do you think, is it something that you have a call and then you go, can you take me through the process of how you hear the call and then go, that needs to change? Is there something there? Because I said it earlier in the podcast. I said I struggle to hear tempo and pitch, so I don't think I'll be any good at calling.
Yep.
But how do you do that, and how do you hear that and say that's out? I need to change this. Because for me, just and I don't know if our listeners are the same, but I could blow through something and move my tongue left or right and know it's made a difference, but it probably sounds very similar. Whereas I'm guessing you could probably say, okay, if I move it a couple mil to the left, that will make this sound.
Yeah.
Is that how it works?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think that just mainly comes with practice. And like I said, 12 years now I've been playing with these things, and yeah, a lot of it just comes down with practice. And I tell a lot of people to practice on the way to work, places like that. Just stick it in your mouth and drive along and blow away. And you don't annoy anybody then, you're only annoying yourself.
Yes, that would make sense. Are there any new ones coming out? Is there something there you're going, I need to make a couple more here? You said that you got the snaggletooth there.
Yeah, I'd like to try and make a few different types of deer call, but for the mouth call instead of just in a tube. Because as you see, when you're using a tube, it's in your hand. So you can't be using your rifle or your bow or whatever whilst you got your call in your hand, where a mouth call's in your mouth, so you can be using it and still have hands free to do whatever you need to do. So I'd love to be able to make a few different deer calls.
You might be able to answer this one for me. I was watching a Meat Eater Hunts episode the other day, and they had Jason Phelps calling elk.
Jason Phelps, I know that name.
Yeah, he's Phelps Game Callers.
Oh, yeah. I've spoke to him before, yeah.
Oh, have you? Okay, yeah. He was putting the diaphragm in and then was running the bugle.
Yes. So
would you know why?
Like he had a big tube?
Yeah, because I was curious. I was sitting there going, well, if he's got the diaphragm in, why is he needing that when he's got the horn or whatever you want to call it?
So the horn that he had there was empty. It's basically a funnel.
Okay, so that's to amplify?
Yeah, and it's to amplify that bugle. So you'll notice he'll start the bugle nice and low, and then it gets out into the bugle, and he adds it into the cone, and that'll funnel it out. And it also adds for direction, so you can be bugling this way, quickly swap and then bugle this way, and it's going to be like an actual deer moving his head, or you can have a couple of people, so there's a couple of different animals bugling all at once. That's what I tell people with the howlers as well. It's going to work a lot better if you've got a few mates that can be howling, so it's like there's another pack on. If you know that you're hunting dogs on the territory, they're there, and you act like another pack, they're going to come to investigate the pack on their territory.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, no, okay, that makes a lot of sense because I was thinking, yeah, why does he need both? But the actual sound is coming through the diaphragm.
Yeah, he's just using the diaphragm cord.
Okay.
Yeah, and you'll probably find he's just using a single reed, just one reed, and it's just a straight reed like a howler.
So let's talk about the reeds. You've talked about single. There's a double, I'm assuming, and a triple.
Yeah, I make up
is
to
there
a 4.
more, less? Okay, so up to like a quad reed cord.
Yeah, and that's usually for an old dog because it's got 4 reeds. It's going to be deeper in pitch. So that's for an old, I call it the old lonely dog.
Okay. Is there different number reeds for different species?
Yeah, so if I'm making it for, say, before I made the snaggletooth, all the rabbit and cat calls and that were all done on a 2 reed. But now I've got the snaggletooth, I can swap between 2 and 3 reeds depending on the pitch and tone that people that are chasing, what they're after.
Yeah, okay. It's man, it's cool. It's been really good to chat and say, like, just to find out more about how it's done, how it's made, but the so many things to it. It's not just as simple as making it and saying, hey, you're good to go, throw it in and go.
Yeah, no, that's what a lot of people get mistaken with, I think. I think that a lot of people think that they're able to just stick it in their mouth and go to town. And no, I try to explain to a lot of people, and I send a lot of information before they buy a diaphragm call on how they work, what they are. So they get a lot of information off me before they actually purchase the call usually.
Would you advise for people to start, like you said, the easiest ones like the rabbit?
Yeah.
Would you advise to start there and then slowly progress?
Yeah, I usually advise people to start on a single reed and learn how to do just a plain E. Get that constant tone and keep it at one solid tone. Don't even try and make an animal noise until you can get one solid tone, and then move your tongue and change it to another solid tone. Once you can make your own tones, then you can figure out how to. So usually the easy way to explain it would be like a lot of listeners might not have heard an American turkey before. We have them here as pets and stuff, but when they're talking to each other, it'll sound like a putt, like a kia. So when you're doing it over the reed, you're going to be going ki ah, and then you're going to speed it up. Kia.
Okay, and that's sounding like the little box that they have, the striker that they scratch.
Yes, exactly, yes.
Yeah, okay. Man, yeah, there's just so much to it. It's so I'm still so fascinated, and I'd definitely want to practice and try. I don't know how good I'll be, but I want to give it a go because it does sound fascinating in just that manipulation that you need to do on top of the product that you're getting. But
this is my musical instrument. I can't play any musical instruments. So
I was about to say, can you play like something like I don't know, what are they, trumpets and trombones and things like that? You can't do any of that. See, it sounds like these callers are so much harder.
I love them all. I love to listen to any of that sort of stuff. I love listening to violin and things like that, but cannot play any of them.
But it just sounds like this is so much harder than one of those. I've always been put off. I think I did keyboard, played chopsticks when I was back in primary school, but I just feel that it's so much more difficult than what a trombone would be. And,
I don't think so. You haven't got as much going on. You're not using your hands and mouth, and it's just in the mouth.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I see that. That's why I steer clear of music. The only music I like is when I press play on the podcast or press play on the phone and get something there. But, mate, that's man, it's been really informative.
Thank you.
I'm super glad to have had you on. I'm still at a bit of a loss, and we might even do a round 2 somewhere down the track because I reckon I'm going to go away from here and I'm going to have so many more questions. But I think we flushed it out quite well, and for anyone that hasn't had much experience with them, that I think we covered a lot, and I've learnt a heap, and that's why I started the podcast, was to learn. And I thank you for coming on and teaching me a lot tonight. That's been really good.
Thanks for having me. It was great fun.
Where can people find you and track you down, and what socials do you have?
It's mainly Instagram. I have everything on Instagram. It's got all my videos, price lists, everything's on there, all my contact details. You can contact me through there anytime. Usually I won't get back to you till the afternoon because I work as a fencer during the day. So yeah, I'm usually out in the middle of the scrub somewhere and leave it dark and usually home by dark.
Is that like the perfect job because you can get out there and you can have calls while you're knocking the fence
It
up?
is. It's great. I love working outdoors anyway. I couldn't work behind a desk.
No, I'm with you there. Mate, really appreciate it. Listeners, if you haven't already, check out Instagram, H2K Hunting Calls. I will have a link in the show notes. But, mate, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. I've had a great time, learned a lot, and I hope listeners have as well. And we'll catch you next time, guys. Bye for now. If you have a topic, guest, question, or any gear that you want to hear about on the podcast, shoot us an email, australianhuntingandbeyond@gmail.com. Alternatively, find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All the links are in the show notes. If you haven't already, make sure you give us a review and subscribe to our podcast on whatever platform you're listening on. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you next time.